Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello, I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our legal system, our justice system, and how they intersect with the citizens of the town of Colonie. Many of us are well aware that an attorney's training begins in law school, and today we're truly blessed by having the president and dean of Albany Law School join us to tell us about the current law school situation here and also nationally. Please join me in welcoming Dean Tom Guernsey from Albany Law School. Dean, thank you.
Well, thank you, Judge. I appreciate the opportunity.
We're thrilled to have you here, and you've come to Albany Law School in 2002, is that correct?
That's correct. Been there now just 7 years, finishing up my 7th year at Albany Law School.
Dean, you're doing a fabulous job for all of us here, not only in the capital region, but in the state of New York, and I'm so proud to call Albany Law School my home, and my grandfather also graduated in 1910, when the school was still a 2-year program, and I believe at that point it moved to a 3-year program. Dean, you've done so many remarkable things since you've been at Albany Law School, and I know that in part your focus is on enhancing the law school and enhancing the opportunities for our graduates. And tell us what's going on currently at Albany Law School.
Well, like most of the rest of the country, we're dealing with the economic crisis that we have. But fortunately, over the last few years, we've been able to put the school in a really strong position. Financially, we've made a lot of improvements in the school, and that's going to get us through this economic crisis pretty well. We announced earlier in the spring that we were going to freeze tuition as a way to help our current students and hopefully attract an even brighter group of students coming in the fall. We have instituted some programs to help our graduating students in light of the economic problems, giving them a discounted LLM program if they want to stay in law school for another year and get an advanced degree. The alumni support has been wonderful. We've doubled annual giving at the law school over the last 7 years, and that's the direct result of alums who have bought into Albany Law School, its future, and are willing to help underwrite the changes we're making.
Dean, you bring so many fantastic credentials to us here at Albany Law School, coming most recently from Southern Illinois University, serving as their dean of the law school. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's right. I was dean at Southern Illinois for 6 years. Spent a year of that as interim vice chancellor for academic affairs and provost. Before that, I spent 16 years on the faculty at the University of Richmond's Law School in Virginia.
Well, Dean, I have to tell you, I was down at the law school most recently, I think, for Kate Stoneman Day, and some other great events, even through the State Magistrates Association. I was teaching a judge course just in April in one of our lecture halls too, and I can tell that the physical plan itself has changed remarkably since I graduated from Albany Law School.
And I have to say, most of those physical changes occurred before I had an opportunity to come to Albany Law School. One of the things we've totally renovated the 1928 building, the library, the wings that people are familiar with. They built the new 2000 building. Since then, through the generosity of Marty Silverman and his vision in terms of University Heights Association, we've actually expanded the size of the campus. The footprint of the campus is probably twice the size as it used to be.
Well, it certainly is, and the library as well, which was constructed after I graduated, is just adds a fabulous dynamic to the opportunities for our students.
Oh, absolutely. The library is actually one of those things about the law school that most people don't realize. When you look, there are 200 ABA-approved law schools in this country. When you look at volume count and title count, Albany Law School is ranked like 31 in the country. It is a world-class law library that serves our students and our faculty very well, and the local bar who use it.
Well, I can tell you Albany Law School has had a dramatic impact on the capital region and in the state of New York. And we're all, it's a source of civic pride for all of us here in the capital region. Fourth oldest law school in the country?
Yes, fourth oldest independent law school in the country. It may very well be about the fifth oldest law school, period. But one of the things that we take great pride in is the fact that Albany Law School has retained its independence since it was founded in 1851. There are only about 15 law schools left that are independent, and that's one of the reasons we're going to be able to get through this economic crisis much better than most law schools in the country, because we can make decisions about the tuition dollars that our students pay, the money from the alums, the endowment money that comes in. Those are decisions. That money is spent in the law school. It's spent on the law students, and it gives us a lot of flexibility to not having to deal with a university administration that has to worry about a history department or an economics department, and then take tuition dollars away from law students and spend them on something else.
And nonetheless, too, many of our citizens might not recognize that, like the medical school, Albany Law School is all part of Union University.
Yes. And Union University it's a loose affiliation that was in late, I think it was 1870 something, where the institutions that make up it knew that there was some value to having a connection within a larger academic setting. And so what Union University allows us to do is develop special relationships with the medical college, the Union College, now the Union Graduate College, and the Pharmacy College, and it helps foster joint degree programs, academic programs that where we share faculty. We have a number of our faculty who teach as adjunct faculty over in the medical center and issues like bioethics. We have joint degree programs with Union College that allow students to get a master's degree and a JD at the same time, or a master's in bioethics and a JD at the same time. So it creates a nice synergy, I guess the term would be, without the burden of having a university, a central university, trying to dictate the legal education program.
And don't we offer a program now with Union College that actually certain students could enjoy a compressed education
Yes.
with their undergraduate training and our law school training? How does that work?
Well, basically what we do is we have students who spend 3 years at an undergraduate institution, then they enter law school. In their first year of law school, they receive credit back at Union College. We do it at University at Albany. We do it with a number of other schools as well. But their first year of law school counts as their fourth year of college. And so they're able to, instead of taking 7 years to get a bachelor's degree and a law degree, they're able to do it in 6 years.
Now, we've also established a relationship with RPI as well. What about that, Dean?
Well, one of the things that, clearly when you look at the future of legal education and the future of the legal profession, it represents the rest of the world and the rest of the economy. And you can't get away from the fact that we're moving to a knowledge-based economy. It's the role of technology cuts across everything. And so to the extent that we can offer our students an exposure to not just the law about patents and trademarks or a copyright, but get them experience with the sort of the point at which the ideas are developed that lawyers then have to facilitate sort of their commercialization, if you will. So we've developed a relationship with the Lally School of Business over at RPI. We are currently offering we're offering a master's program in tech transfer. They're also offering a program. They're separate degrees, but we share faculty. Students are able to take classes at the law school as well as in the business school at RPI, and it's worked out really, really well. We have a Center for Law and Innovation at the law school, in which we have a faculty member who's the director of that, works very closely with the business school at RPI and teaching courses and holding seminars that deal with these. Mostly it's the idea of commercialization of the kind of scientific advances that are being made in engineering schools and colleges of science.
Dean, many of our citizens are always interested in the acceptance process, the admissions process, how many students we have, and what type of qualifications our school looks for now in a student. What do you look for now?
Well, you really what you're looking for, quite honestly, is the best and the brightest students that you could possibly get. There is no doubt that the legal profession and the people they serve are better off with highly qualified individuals. And so there is no doubt that over the last few years, the academic expectations of our candidates coming in have increased significantly. And we look at, first and foremost, we look at the law school admissions test, the LSAT, and the undergraduate grade point average. We know that the best predictor we have of success in law school is that LSAT score combined with that undergraduate grade point average. Higher the LSAT score, on average, the better you're going to do in law school. And then we know, of course, that the best predictor of whether you're going to pass the bar or not is what your grade point average was in law school. And so it's sort of this idea that if our intent is to serve the public good, our intent is to graduate students who are going to be able to practice law, then we've got to be thinking back in terms of the admission process to get those students in. And then, of course, all other things being equal in terms of LSAT and GPA, we want to look for a class that represents the world that these students are going to be practicing in.
That's right.
And so we're interested in having students not just from upstate New York, but we want students who are from around the country. We're interested in a diverse student body. We're interested in making sure that 60% of all college graduates nowadays are women. We want to make sure that entering class has a representative showing of women. And so basically the bottom line is we're looking for the best and brightest who we think are going to be successful in law school, will pass the New York State Bar, and then provide good service to their clients.
Well, no doubt your programming is working well. I see in the most recent issue of our Albany Law School magazine that the employment rate for our recent graduates is very strong.
Yeah. Yes. One of the things that has struck me since I've been here is that for, the records we have go back 25 years. And for each of those 25 years, the job placement rate for Albany Law School grads has been above the national average. So that the class that graduated in 2008 had a 94% job placement 9 months after graduation. The national average was 90%. Now, I will say, it's not going to be that good this coming year. There is no doubt about it. Most of the graduates in those numbers, the 94% number, received their job before the economic collapse back in the fall. Right now, it's a tough job market every place. You see the headlines in legal journals all the time about layoffs. We have applicants, or we have students who graduated in May who were going to who received received job offers in large law firms, for example, in New York City.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, the firm has said, "You can't start in the fall. You're going to have to start in the spring." And then you hope that they really will be able to start in the spring. So it's a tough time. Add to it a state hiring freeze. We have a large number of our graduates go into state government work. It's one of the reasons they went to Albany Law School, because of those connections and their desire to be involved in state and local government. And that's had an impact on these kids who just graduated.
Well, Dean, you've responded to the current economic climate as well by doing a variety of things at the law school for the benefit of the school and the students, including freezing tuition.
Yes. And one of the things that we looked at was the idea that if we could afford it at this stage, then what we needed to do is figure out a way to, one, at least minimize the impact on the current students by not raising their tuition. And then, of course, attract, as part of our recruitment of the best and those brightest students, to make us hopefully even more competitive in attracting good students by freezing tuition. It doesn't come without a cost. I mean, the bottom line is it takes X amount of dollars to educate a law student. So the faculty and the staff of the law school have responded. We've made some budget cuts in areas that don't affect the academic program. There's always a little extra money, fat in any kind of budget that you have. And the faculty and the staff are not receiving salary increases for the coming year. And I have to tell you, I've been really amazed at how positive the staff and the faculty have been in terms of supporting those efforts. We've taken some steps in terms of if a student who graduated in May wants to, they can get an advanced law degree. As you know, you go to law school for 3 years. You get a JD degree.
That's right.
That lets you take the bar exam. You can go to law school for another year and get a Master's of Law, an LLM. And we've made our LLM available to our graduating students at less than half of the tuition. Again, a decision to try and provide them with an opportunity for some additional training if that's what they choose to do. We know there's a cost. As soon as you become a member of the bar, as you know, you've got to go through, I think it's 32 credit hours of continuing legal education. That can be pretty expensive. I mean,
That's correct.
Depending on where you get it, you could be talking $3,000–4,000 worth of additional training you have to get. And we've made a commitment to our graduating class. In fact, we rolled it back to the classes of 2007, 2008, 2009. The law school will provide that continuing legal education free of charge for those 3 classes.
And Dean, even in the face of these economic challenges, Albany Law School continues to deliver so many services, especially to our underserved populations throughout the capital region.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that there are many things about a law school people don't realize because we're not exactly on the front page every day. But we have an in-house legal clinical program that it surprises many people the level of services that we actually provide the community for low-income clients. We have a domestic violence clinic that works very closely with the district attorney's office in Troy. We have a health law clinic that represents cancer patients who are having legal problems. Again, if you're a low income a person and you end up having cancer, there are all kinds of legal issues that would be very expensive to deal with while you're struggling with your illness, such as Social Security issues, Medicare, Medicaid benefits. We run as part of this healthcare clinic an HIV/AIDS clinic that probably serves more victims of HIV/AIDS than any other legal services provider in the capital region. We run a low-income taxpayer clinic. Again, most people might not think about it, but if you've got a low income, you still pay taxes and you still have issues with the IRS. And so that students under the supervision of attorneys are handling a fair number of cases, and I think it's a major part of what our service expectation is to the community that we live in.
Well, I think you're absolutely right too. Many of the efforts that are and contributions made by the law school into our community are not known to the level and extent that they should be, and without those services, we would certainly jeopardize so many of our valuable citizens and their needs as well. As we move forward, I also noticed in the most recent Albany Law magazine that our school was named in the top 20 schools of public interest law. What does that mean, Dean?
Well, public interest law is essentially it's a field of law that is specifically designed to help low-income individuals, or in some circumstances, we would count jobs in state or local government that are not paid as well as one might expect. If a public defender in the state of New York doesn't make enough to live on in reality. And so what we do is we've set up some programs in which we encourage students to get involved in those areas. And it's based on the resources. The ranking came basically from the amount of resources that the law school has put into programs to encourage public interest work, but is also a reflection of how many of our students are actually engaged in providing services and assistance to essentially low-income clients, state and local governments that don't otherwise have the resources that they should.
Well, obviously, Albany Law School is taking a lead in that issue as well, being ranked in the top 20 of all law schools in the nation. Recently, I had Senator John Dunn as a guest here, and he was part of a commission to study the indigent defense services throughout. And of course, they've concluded that actually the state should take over ultimately the entire program so that it's balanced, even, and there's adequate funding for it.
Oh, I think it's probably long overdue in the state of New York and in a lot of other places as well. It's not a very popular, if you're talking about criminal defense, as you know, it's not a particularly positive issue for most legislators to try and take the side of providing more rights.
Well, I can tell you, Dean, in my own courthouse, the Public Defender's Office has the largest single caseload of any other attorney's office in my courthouse. Yeah. And their caseload seems to be increasing geometrically as well. Yeah. And as the economy continues to move in a negative fashion, their own caseload may become larger as well for the responsibilities that they need to provide to those citizens who are unable otherwise to enjoy defense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's a nationwide problem that is going to have to be dealt with at some point.
And I know, too, that Albany Law School and some of the other clinics and services that it provides, it keys in on domestic violence, as you said, as well. And I've noticed in my 10 years on the bench here in Colonie that issue of domestic violence has grown dramatically just in the 10 years of my view. And the law and the issues that are involved. I'm out routinely at 3 in the morning, typically on arraignments concerning domestic violence. Yeah. And of course, the town judge becomes a family court judge after 5 o'clock, I understand from our state legislature, so that it gives us a busy evening as well. But it's a very significant part of our society today.
Absolutely. And again, it's interesting that part of that is, the law school plays a role in that. Part of it's the visibility of the issue. I think the police officers, the lawyers, the judges are better trained, and that in terms of spotting the issue and taking the issue seriously. And certainly from our perspective as the law school and our little part of the, in the justice, preparation for people in the justice system, issues of family violence, relationship violence are much more prevalently talked about in law school than when I went to law school back in the 70s.
Well, there's no question it's had an impact on our court system, just as addictions have as well in that way. Yeah. Dean, last year it first got to my notice that the state legislature might have been considering funding new law schools in the state of New York for one reason or another, and I just wondered if you had any, what your thoughts are on adding law schools into the state of New York at this time using taxpayer dollars.
Oh, well, I think that the idea of creating new law schools is, at this stage, not a really well thought out positive move. Put aside the fact, if you look at it from the standpoint of, are there enough people interested in coming to law school? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Upstate New York is declining in population. The state's education department projects significant declines in high school graduates over the next 7 years, in which at course 4 years after that, they're going to be when they start thinking about law school. We know that law school admissions, they've actually surprisingly increased a little bit this year in terms of the number of applicants, but not significant. The job market, of course, is horrible for everybody, including lawyers. The state's Department of Labor projects that the demand for first professional degrees, which would be basically law schools and medical schools, is going to remain stagnant over the next 7 years. So what you've got is a question of that the demand for the students coming in and the demand for the graduates at the end simply doesn't justify the creation of new law schools. And add to that the real cost. We ran some numbers, and it probably costs somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million to start a law school. And then, of course, one of my favorite arguments is that, well, if it's a state school, then tuition will be lower, and so the students will pay less money. And I like to point out that, well, no, that's not true. If you start a law school at Binghamton, they can't educate that student any more cheaply than I can educate them. It's a question of who's going to pay for that education. So if you look at the state contribution so that they can have in-state tuition, you may be talking as much as $20 million a year in state money going to any new law school. So it's a very expensive proposition. It's in an environment in which there doesn't seem to be much of a demand. And I tell people all the time, look, it's easy. There are other needs out there. Maybe you should start a nursing school. Maybe, I'll even go so far as to invest in the current state schools that you have. But to go out and create more spaces when there's no demand at either end of the continuum just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Even if you took the idea that I hear sometimes that, well, if you have a state law school, they're going to be more interested in staying local, and they'll end up being able to, with lower tuition, they'll be able to take the public interest jobs that we were talking about before. And my response to that is, maybe, though I doubt that given the nature of the market. But what you could do is, if that's your real goal, then you ought to just take that $50 million per law school and $20 million per year and invest it in that issue. Raise the salaries of those state and local, those public interest lawyers. Give more grants to legal aid. Raise the salaries for public defenders, or set up a loan repayment program for graduates of New York law schools who go into public interest work. But anyway, I obviously, I know when I talk about this that the presumption is I'm biased because I do lead an existing law school, but I just think it doesn't make a lot of economic sense right now.
But it would also be unwise for any proponent of such a notion to discount someone with your background and experience and position as to law school education in general. So I think that what you've told us makes tremendous sense, and there may be better ways that the state can either support our current legal system and develop and provide opportunities for current law students,
yes,
as opposed to creating more bricks and mortar in that way. How do you see the future, Dean, of law school education? And has Albany Law School done anything to start looking at where we're going?
I think this current economic crisis and the number of law firms, major law firms in this country, the top 100 law firms, as measured by some studies, are really rethinking their hiring, and they're really rethinking what they expect of those associates when they graduate from law school. You combine that with, there have been a couple of studies out recently, one by the Carnegie Foundation and another by a group of law professors dealing with the best practices in legal education. I think the economic crisis, the development of these two reports, you're going to see over the next 10, 15 years a major shift in what law schools are expected to do. We've traditionally focused on sort of the three main functions of all higher education: teaching, scholarship, and service. There is no doubt that scholarship is a really important part of that, and most people at the law school will tell you that that's been a major focus of mine over the last 7 years, is increasing the quantity and quality of the scholarship that comes out. Many of our faculty hires, we were able to attract an endowed professor from Ohio State. A number of years ago, we've just hired a faculty member from Boston College into an endowed professorship. Another endowed professor we were able to attract. That focuses in large part on raising the visibility of the law school with regard to scholarship, which is very important. I think what you're going to see at our law school over the next few years, I know what you'll see at our law school over the next few years, I think you're going to see in legal education a renewed focus on what actually goes on in the classroom. What actually are we teaching the students, and how much of it does relate to the practice of law? It doesn't mean we're going to be, it's not going to do away with the first year of legal education, which is highly theoretical. It doesn't mean that everything else is going to be you're doing internships or externships in terms of learning the nuts and bolts of the practice. I do think you're going to see serious talk about should legal education be restructured so that in a sense it builds on itself. One of the criticisms of legal education is that it's 3 years of the same thing. And maybe we ought to be thinking differently about the second year ought to be building on the first year, but adding some new things. And then the third year, not just repeating what the second year was, but providing a different experience as it trains people to be lawyers. So I think that's in general. What we're doing at the law school, I'll give a little sneak preview here, we're going to announce it formally in the fall, but we've created a Center on Excellence in Law Teaching that will unveil. Its primary focus is going to it's going to be internally. It's going to work on focusing on issues of pedagogy, looking at these reports on best practices, figuring out are there ways that we can change the legal education experience for our students at Albany Law School, but it's also going to be looking nationally. We already have a blog up and running that is a best practices blog, and that's the editor of that is Professor Mary Lynch, and we get a lot of hits on that blog as people are sharing ideas about how we might change the pedagogy in legal education.
Well, it's fabulous that you're with us and continuing to lead Albany Law School forward. And what, 100 and how many years is Albany Law School?
158.
Wow,
it was
that's fabulous.
1851.
Yep.
Second oldest corporation in the capital region. I think Albany Medical Center is the only institution that is older than Albany Law School.
And it was three gentlemen, one of whom eventually served on the Court of Appeals, I think Amasa Parker, and there were two others as well. One of them actually lived in the town of Colonie and had a house on Route 9. The house has now been moved to Cherry Tree Road. It was moved off the old plank road as it expanded in Loudonville, which is part of Colonie, and the house was relocated onto Cherry Tree, which is a street across the street. But his daughter was at Ford's Theater with Abraham Lincoln in the booth when he was assassinated.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. You know, it's funny because there are amazing stories about people who have had a connection to Albany Law School. I found out the other day that I got my LLM at Temple University, and I found out the other day for the first time that an Albany Law School alum started Temple University in Philadelphia. We have James Matthew Campbell, who was the first African-American to graduate from a New York law school, first African-American judge in New York, brought a lawsuit in the 1870s that desegregated the public schools in Albany. Now think about it, that's 80 years before Brown versus Board of Education, and of course 15 or so years before Plessy versus Ferguson that had said separate but equal was okay. But an Albany Law School graduate was responsible for being 80 years ahead of his time.
I love the article too in our recent magazine about our Civil War graduates and the impact that they had on the continuing development of our young nation.
Oh yeah, there are some amazing stories. I mean, it just really is. It's a place where we have a wonderful group of alums. I mean, they are so supportive. The annual fund which is really that telephone call everybody gets from their colleges, that which is probably one of the most accurate measures we have of whether or not our alums are supporting the program, that has doubled in the last 7 years, and that's a direct result of our alums having a tie and a commitment to what's going on at that law school. And we want to make sure it's a place that they can be proud of, because we know we talk all the time about the great success these graduates are having and what a role they've played for 158 years.
Well, the entire capital region has certainly benefited by Albany Law School, and certainly the law school itself benefits by the leadership of Dean and President Thomas Guernsey, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Judge. I enjoyed it.
We're very lucky to have you. And I'm Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.